SNAICC advises Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that the following episode of Kids, Culture, Community, SNAICC Yarns contains references to topics that may be triggering to the community. Your social and emotional safety is important. If this recording has brought up any concerns for you, please contact 13Yarn on 139276.
Welcome to Kids, Culture, Community, SNAICC Yarns, the podcast that amplifies the work, voices and strength of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, families and communities. In this episode, we bring you a powerful conversation from the SNAICC 25 main stage. SNAICC Chair, Yorta Yorta, Dja Dja Wurrung, Taungurung and Boon Elder Aunty Muriel Bamblett meets with children's commissioners and guardians from across the country. They discuss the urgent changes needed to address the overrepresentation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children in out-of-home care and youth justice systems. They bring a crucial human rights and accountability lens to these critical issues. This is episode 7, in conversation with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children's commissioners and guardians. I'm excited to introduce and facilitate a panel discussion with our Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander commissioners and guardians, and I hope you are impressed with them as much as we are and as proud of them as what we are. We know that we've made great progress in advancing the rights of our children, but we also know that their rights continue to be under threat. Our commissioners and guardians' roles are what we've all fought for over the years for a very long period. They are there to protect the rights of our children and young people, their rights to be healthy, to be safe, to be supported and connected to their family and culture and grow up as strong Aboriginal children and young people. It's amazing to think that when I started in the sector, there weren't any independent First Nations commissioners or accountability roles like theirs. But now that we have them, we cannot be complacent. Their role is really about upholding rights and voices of our children and keeping us all accountable. And that means holding government and mainstream services to account, but also holding our sectors to account and making sure everyone is working effectively to achieve change. It's important to understand that the commissioners and guardians have all been set up by governments with different powers and mandates, and some you will hear today are stronger than others. We warmly thank Sue Ann Hunter, please, National Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Commissioner. Yeah. Sue Ann, there was a lady on that table just kept cheering for you. Is she? Are you related? You're not, are you? But you were very supportive, and thank you for that. We are truly a grown-up sector, because where else could you have this conversation? I have been in so many conferences and forums, and we never have commissioners or guardians actually as keynotes or even presenting. And so for us, it shows that we're all on the same page. We all want best interests. We want the best outcomes for our children. Today, and I think Sue Ann's been very clear, she sees us, so the eyes are on us, but let's see how, when we get to about the 12 months, whether you see us and whether we, the proof will be in the pudding. But I think some of the things, and one point I just want to raise is when looking at expanding protections, particularly at the moment in the early years settings, all I would say is that don't overburden our early years settings by putting more and more compliance, that it makes our early years services at risk. We know that you're going to have really good data systems, and so we're looking forward to that. But I have the absolute pleasure now to bring up the rest of our panel. And I'm going to ask them one by one to come up. So first off is Jacqueline McGowan-Jones, and she's the Commissioner for Children and Young People in Western Australia. Jacqueline is a Warramunga woman who grew up in the Victorian town of Bendigo. Jacqueline has a long history working in education, child protection and Aboriginal affairs, and was the CEO of Theory, the community-controlled organisation that is responsible for delivering critical supports and services to families following a loss of suicide and other fatal traumatic incidents. Jacqueline's experiences include senior executive roles and has worked across a broad range of government departments with strong connections. These two are very naughty, I have to watch them. Natalie Lewis is the next one I want to introduce up. And Natalie is the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Children's Commissioner for Queensland. Natalie is a Gamilaroi woman who is a nationally and internationally recognised advocate for children's rights. Natalie is motivated by the voices and lived experience of children most disadvantaged by the systems intended to protect them. With a career spanning more than 25 years, Natalie has worked in frontline service delivery, program and policy development, research and organisational leadership. She has led significant reforms across Aboriginal child protection, Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander child protection and family services sectors, including playing an instrumental role in embedding the Aboriginal child placement principle in Australian legislation. And we thank you for that, Natalie. Now I have the absolute pleasure to introduce the baby amongst, not age-wise, but Dale Agius, newly appointed Commissioner for Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander children and young people in South Australia. There's some parochial people in the room really yelling. And can I please thank April Laurie, who I've just seen you, April, so yes, we love April. Now, Dale is a Ghana Ngarrindjeri man who was appointed in April this year. Dale has more than 2 decades of experience in strategic leadership and advocacy for Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander children, families and communities. Dale was South Australia's Commissioner for First Peoples Voice and led the consultations with Aboriginal groups to lay the foundation for a First Nations voice to Parliament in South Australia. He has held positions across the public service, including Director of Aboriginal Practice and Partnerships in the Department of Human Services and Director of Aboriginal Practice in the Department of Child Protection. He also has an extensive experience in statewide engagement with our communities, advocating for inclusive representation and policy reforms. Thank you, Dale. The next one I want to introduce is Shona Reid, and she's a guardian for children and young people in South Australia. Shona is a proud Eastern Oronto, how do I say that? Oronto woman, yep, with deep family connections to the Heart Ranges in the Northern Territory, based in South Australia where she's lived and worked most of her life. Shona is committed to the advancement and rights of Aboriginal children, young people and families and communities, and is guardian for children and young people. Shona promotes and advocates for the rights and best interests of children and young people in care in South Australia. It is important to note that Shona is not the legal guardian for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, but the role is to champion their rights. Beyond her professional work, Shona is married to Lyndon, and together they are raising a strong and loving family of 7 children. What? And she only has 1 girl, so 6 boys, and she considers these her greatest joy and inspiration. So, yeah, I included that. Shahleena Musk is the next commissioner we want to introduce to you. Shahleena is a Larrakia woman from Darwin, Northern Territory, and is the current Children's Commissioner in the Office of the Children's Commissioner in Northern Territory. Shahleena's bio reads absolutely, she's done so many things. She has over 2 decades experience working in legal policy and advocacy roles with a focus on children's rights and youth justice. Shahleena has worked as a Crown prosecutor in both the Northern Territory and Western Australia, and for over a decade she worked with the Aboriginal Legal Service in Western Australia and the top end of NT in roles including as a criminal solicitor and a youth lawyer. So amazing to have this amazing panel of people up before you. The first question I have is protecting the human rights of our children and young people is at the core of the Commissioners and Guardians' roles, including their right to stay connected to their family, culture and community, and particularly to our country and our ceremonies. How should we think about these rights in relation to child protection and child and family welfare services? And can I ask you to also think about your answers, because there are many people that are delivering services in health that are here and that are delivering services as well in the early years setting. So thinking about how we apply those rights across. I kept looking at Natalie, so she ended up picking up the mic. Thank you.
I saw that look. So I think, fundamentally we have to recognise that our children are rights holders, and then that makes us duty bearers. It also means that when we are looking at children and young people in the context of our roles, a lot of the time that's limited to statutory systems, but they don't cease to be less entitled to be healthy or to get access to a quality education or to be treated with dignity. Those rights endure irrespective of the systems that we find our children in. And so we need to understand that these are not just things that are nice to do. These are international law. These are obligations that we have to our children in our practice, in the policies that we contribute to. And fundamentally, when we're talking about the performance of systems, and that's largely, I think, one of the things we have in common as the commissioners, that actually, when it comes to willful disregard of the rights of our children, that silence is unforgivable. And so I think that's why we've got a really good crew of people, because I'm more than happy to speak up.
Thank you very much. Now,
I think one of the things that we talk about all the time is that we've signed the international covenants. What we as a group of commissioners, guardians and advocates are really continuing to say is Australia must sign these into domestic law. We had a tragic loss of a child in detention in Western Australia, and the government said, we didn't sign the Declaration on the Rights of the Child or the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and I'm not bound by those, I'm bound by state law. We are all bound. And so we need to advocate, every single person in this room. I don't care who you write to, just keep writing to every single person you can. We must enact the Covenant on the Rights of the Child into domestic law.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shona and then Dale. Sorry, Dale.
Sorry, Dale. I think if we go back to why the Declaration on the Rights of the Child was developed in the first place, it absolutely was about recognising that systems and adults particularly were sidelining children's interests because it was difficult and it was convenient for systems to do things to kids, and it was convenient for work practices to slip because of the interest of adults over children. And I think we find ourselves where when it was developed, there was a lot of enthusiasm and engagement in that. It's been a few decades now, many decades now, and we're starting to see similar effect happening across each jurisdiction, I think, around where we're looking at the rights of the child, and it's getting difficult. Systems are starting to slip. It's becoming inconvenient, it's becoming expensive, and so governments and our systems are starting to let that go. We have in certain states where they sideline human rights laws to get pieces of legislation through, or to get particular behaviours through. So I think one of the roles that we have, and we are unified, is that these rights are absolute. There is no negotiation. There is no, these aren't theoretical pieces. It was actually driven out of children who were hurting deeply because grown-ups couldn't get it right, and they shouldn't have to suffer at the hands of people who just want to make things more efficient or effective for themselves. So I'm really proud that we have a group of commissioners who get together and pull that up. And no matter what, we always call it out when we see it happening. And as inconvenient as that is, as difficult as we may seem, that is our function. And whether it's in an individual case or systemically, that's our job. And I'm really proud that we all do that, in the absolute context. So, yeah.
So Dale, I saw you.
Yeah, good morning. I think I just have to pay tribute to my predecessor in terms of this conversation, because South Australia now has one of the most strongest, I guess, inquiry and discovery powers across the country. That wasn't hard fought. That was led by sheer determination, sheer guts and sheer persistence from, I'm going to call her Commissioner Laurie, because she's not a commissioner, but we all know that once you're a commissioner in our community, you're always a commissioner. For those who don't know Aunty April, do you want to stand up? Because we should give you a massive round of applause for what you've done for not only South Australia, but for our country. So, April, come be recognised by us mob. How proud we are of you, April. Is very proud to get South Australia to a position it's in. I'm very fortunate.
Do you know what? I remember April when she was working in the department. It would be well over 20 years ago. She was a little baby child protection person across the other side now, and boy did she change.
So if any National Commission needs some support on how to draft some really powerful legislation, I would recommend April to be convening some sort of meeting through me and maybe Commissioner, our new National Commissioner, to help guide some of the legislation reform, because it does change the way that I engage with some of the state government departments and some of our funders and some of our NGO and ACO sectors. I have a conversation probably every week with a minister or a CEO or a government chief executive or an agency head, engaging in sort of policy reform and program initiatives. What we've got here in South Australia, well, what I noticed in this room, we've got representatives here from regional communities in South Australia, coming from Whyalla and Port Pirie, who are ACO and NGO sectors who are working very hard to design Aboriginal ways of working in the way that is led and designed by Aboriginal communities. That's a hard task to do, given that the conversation that Shona's just had with the political sort of narrative we're trying to fight against, the system reform that we're trying to transform. We've got small community NGO sectors out there still trying to create Aboriginal ways of working and doing, and that's, I guess, the important step next is how do we sort of embed Aboriginal ways of working in practice throughout departments, in practice throughout regional local services, the ones that have true interface with our communities and families, to give an Aboriginal way of working in a way that sort of suits our communities and our young people and their families.
Thank you. Shahleena. Thanks, Dale.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think there's not much to add. For me, the Convention on the Rights of the Child is about recognising that children are vulnerable, so they're going through crucial stages of development. That's why the Convention came into force in the first place, is children need to be protected. They need everything from education to safe, stable housing and caring adults in their lives to help them develop appropriately, to get the nurturing and access to services and supports and carers that really care about them. And for me, there's a lot happening in the Northern Territory that doesn't reflect respect for or promotion of children's rights. But that doesn't stop me and others here doing their job, because governments will somehow favour the majority over the minority. They will favour people who have voting rights over those who don't. And children are often voiceless in these conversations, and they're the ones that we need to fight harder for. So, yeah, that's part and parcel of our jobs, and I think it's embedded in all our legislation, or those that do have legislation, and it's a crucial responsibility that we all hold dear.
Absolutely. So the second question I have, can you name some of the successes you've seen in your jurisdiction or elsewhere to reduce the rate of overrepresentation of our children in out-of-home care or progressing to out-of-home care, juvenile justice?
I'll start.
Did you dive on that?
I've worked in a few jurisdictions, so I've worked in Western Australia, I've worked in Victoria and the Northern Territory, and I guess a common thread, whether or not it's child protection, education, and the youth justice, it's community-led responses, of course. So Aboriginal community-controlled organisations have the solutions for our children, and it's about ensuring children are proud of who they are, understand where they come from and how they fit in society, and building on those strengths. So I think we always, and this is again a reflection on the Northern Territory, but children are seen as the problem. They're the solution that needs to be solved, rather than the children who are deserving of all in life that can help them reach their potential. So yeah, community-led solutions such as mentoring, parenting programs when we're talking about adults who might be struggling, who are dealing with hardship. It's access to safe, stable accommodation, but it's the services and supports where you've got largely Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander faces there to greet people who have the lived experience, who have the ways of engaging with people that are non-threatening. But I think it is community-controlled organisations who are designing and delivering programs, place-based, where and when people need them, who are the ones who are going to help people to basically thrive. And I think that's what I see the best across the nation is when it's us mob delivering for our own.
We have a short period of time, and I do want to leave 10 minutes. So, not growling at you, but yeah, I am growling at you. Can you please keep your answers just short? Yeah, Jacqueline.
Sure, absolutely.
Jacqueline, they all
We've
know
been
the guilty
schooled.
parties, so they're all letting me know.
Can I just say,
Shona was next. Sorry. Jack.
were you next, Shona?
Jacqueline, I'm the chair. Jacqueline.
Thank you, Arnie. I think I'll be really quick. One of the things that I have the privilege of doing is individual advocacy and systemic advocacy. And we had over 5,000 contacts with children in South Australia who come into contact with my office. So it was pretty amazing for our little state. But one of the things that works for them at an individual level, and what I see constantly, is when successes are had is when children are part of the decision-making process, when they have a true and genuine voice. But not just that. I think the concept more is around when those who are so disempowered become powerful. That is the piece. And I think we can take that away, whether you're a government, non-government service provider, small health, education, child protection, youth detention. It doesn't matter. I think when those who are the least powerful become powerful in a conversation, that is when we see genuine change happen. And I think we can all embrace that no matter where we work. And I think that's a game changer.
Can I just check with you? So do those rules apply in your house with your 7 children?
No.
No. Jacqueline.
Yeah, look, I think this is a really, really important part of what we do. I've also, like Shahleena, I've worked in every jurisdiction in Australia, and our community sector, our ACCO sector, brings forward the strength and power we need for our children. But we have to come together, and sometimes we play into government's hands and fight each other for the money. And I think, we need to give children a voice. I've just interviewed 16,500 children and young people across WA about their health and wellbeing, and that report that we do every 3 years, this will be the first time we're doing trend analysis on what is happening for our kids. But what I can tell you right now, we've gone from 47% of children in out-of-home care being Aboriginal when I was heading up Aboriginal child protection in Western Australia to 61% almost in out-of-home care. This is a crisis, it is a disgrace. We talk about youth crime, we have to change the narrative. In Western Australia, we have 645,000 children and young people aged 0 to 17, 46,000 of them are Aboriginal. There's only 1,200 kids in community corrections and there's less than 100 in detention. And of those 100 in detention at any given time, more than 60% are on remand and will not get a custodial sentence. And we keep talking about a youth crime crisis. There is no bloody crisis. What is the crisis? The crisis is in governments not upholding the rights of our children. And we need to act on this.
Very well said, thank you. Nat?
So
My
I'm going to
next
go off
question's for
brand
Sue Ann,
and be
so.
positive. So I think that when in Queensland, look, it's shameful at the moment. Like, there's no other word for it in terms of the rate of overrepresentation. But there are these glimpses of, promising practice where, and by no coincidence, in those locations, it is where they have fully and faithfully implemented all 5 elements of the child placement principle. So when we look at places like, thank you, Darcy, because you gave me this morning, but in Maroochydore, there's only 5 young people left to go for them to eliminate overrepresentation in that area. And that is because they are looking at the world in a different way, and that in that location, the department has moved beyond just being comfortable sharing space with blackfellas. They are sharing power, and that has resulted in the best interests of our child being upheld. So, yeah, I think there is positive examples.
Are we measuring the right things? Because clearly there are communities all over Australia whose children aren't entering the child protection system, where communities, there's culture, there's strong aunts, strong uncles, there's, we can all name somewhere, some part of our jurisdiction where we are making some really, significant changes. In Victoria, we've got like Portland, Hayward, big Aboriginal population, but don't seem to have the same child protection numbers, juvenile justice, criminal justice, family violence. So are there communities, do you have hope, Sue Ann, about some, the work ahead?
I do have hope, and I think what Nat was just saying is that we know in our communities what works best. And when you talk about evidence building, I think everything comes with funding and then comes with an agreement of what you have to measure. We don't get to measure our own of what is good. We usually measure what the funding wants us to measure. And I think we need to have our own evidence base that in those pockets we are doing well. And when you put power back into our community, our children thrive. And there's a lot of that. And I really want to showcase that good work at the Commission, because I think there's one actually, I'm just going to go off topic, sorry, Aunty Muriel, is the low expectation people have of our children. It is absolutely disgusting, and we have to raise the expectation, because think about it, if there's not much expected of you, you're not going to reach for the stars, right? And every time I speak to somebody, it's about deficit. Our children are fabulous. I want to raise their voices. I want their voices to be, and when we talk about getting evidence or getting the stories of our children, we don't put it through a filter of an adult. It's raw, it's real, and people need to hear that. But we need to raise the expectation for our kids. They can go to school. They can get jobs. They are deadly. They can, sing and dance in language and do art and whatever they need to do. But first, as adults and first peoples, we need to believe in them so others do.
All right, key question, thank you. So who needs to be accountable, Dale? Who do we hold accountable? Is it parents?
Is that a universal question?
Systems? Is it,
Look, I think for me, I'm trying to hold ministers and CEOs accountable from the top end. What does that mean? What does that look like? Our child protection minister convene a child protection governance group with the deputy, the assistant police commissioner, CEO of Department of Human Services, CEO of child protection, CEO of education, CEO of early years. So what does that mean in terms of holding accountability across those departments in any given sort of committee meeting? And sort of what was just said then is, how do these other sectors outside of child protection engage in the Aboriginal child placement principles? What does that look like? How are they informed? How are they educated? And how are they held accountable? That, say if a SAPO officer's talking to a young fella, what's his awareness of the Aboriginal child placement principles in the engagement point, not at the apprehension or the arrest point? So what's the early awareness that we could spread across the broader sector child protection is the lead agency that should be leading the information, the education around the child placement principles. Sure, and would question that that's not done to its full extent either.
So I read your resume. You've been a director of practice in a couple of government departments.
Hello, we're getting a bit
yeah,
sharper.
it comes back to bite you at some stage. But in reality, children aren't just in the child protection system, and so roles and accountabilities across health, across early years child protection, but also education. So, what are our responsibilities across, and your accountabilities to get better outcomes for children, no matter where they be?
Yeah, well, the obvious thing is more engagement at school, more engagement with family programs. These are simple targets. School doesn't mean just attending a school. How are schools designing Aboriginal supportive programs to support kids to get through the front gate? Will that mean, breakfast and family support to get the kids up early into the classroom and engaged while they're there? We have South Australia programs like SASTA and CONTAF and STARS to support young males and females to get to the classroom and support their education outcomes. In the family and support sector, we know that there's a massive gap between the strength family approaches that support families to be held together, and there's a massive funding gap for that. So what does that mean in terms of the state putting forward a budget, and a reform budget? Because we're asking for new money here. There's money that's already on the table, but there's an 85% gap in terms of service response for families. And within that 85%, we're probably saying around there's 55% Aboriginal families that are falling through the gap. So what that tells me is between the relationship between the Department of Human Services and Child Protection is that there's a 65% gap of Aboriginal families that are falling through. Completely unacceptable.
Yep.
But
Goes
what's
to
our
my
data
next
around
question. I'll come to you in a minute, Jack. Why do we need national standards? Why? And how would national standards work? How quickly, Dale, did you hand that mic over to Natalie Lewis?
Be fast.
Because both I think Jackie and Nat have been around a couple of years, and so they may be able to add a lot of depth about this, but certainly why are national standards important?
Well, national standards mean that people have to aspire to these if we
Standards for
embed
who?
them. Pardon?
Standards for who? The sector?
Standards for everyone. Every single adult in this country, not just us, mob. Every single adult in this country has a responsibility to children and young people. Every single...
that keeps yelling out there, you're a good cheer squad there.
That's that Tennant Creek mob there now. What can I say? Every single adult in the country. And we have to, as commissioners, really advocate strongly and have the hard yarns across the whole sector. The non-government sector, the Aboriginal community-controlled sector, the government sector. And we have to highlight, that's our job, we have to highlight that the rights of our children every single day are being abused. Yep. We keep removing children from circumstances over which they have no control, and we blame them. So national standards need to make every single person accountable. We need to know and agree that these are the minimum things we will do. We cannot continue to say, oh, that might work in Western Australia, but it won't work in the Northern Territory. Well, get rid of your colonial borders. Our mob don't have those borders.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we've sort of been co-opted into this language of standards, and for me, the unnegotiable minimum standard is incorporation of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child in domestic law in this country. That is the clearest expression of what obligations exist for every government department, for every funded service provider, whether you're mob or not, whether you're for profit or not. Your primary accountability is to our children, not to your service agreement, not to increasing your footprint. It is to our children. And so I think that until we have our children as a national policy priority in this country, and that we don't, until we get behind every child in this country by incorporating the UNCRC in domestic law, then we will continue to fluff around the edges and talk about standards that can be readily overridden and readily ignored in places like Queensland.
Yeah, I'm going to go to, yep. I'm going to go to Shona and then I'm going to go to Shahleena because I think there's just this massive assumption out there that our people know about the numbers of child protection, and we know in this room, and governments know, but many of our community would say, have we got a child protection problem? And do you think you have a role as far as educating our people about how dire the situation is as well? And so, Shona, I might go to Shahleena first because, I read the Commission's report just about every year, and things are pretty dire in the Northern Territory. And I know that this is a complex question for you to ask, and it's certainly not your accountability alone. But how do we, sort of improve the lot for First Nations people, whether you're living in the Torres Straits, Northern Territory? You've got a remoteness, and I don't think Australia understands where our people live and the remoteness and the complexity of the families. And so do you think you have an awareness raising as well and informing our people? Because those reports never go to our people.
This is hard to respond to because I think people know. We live and breathe this. This is the reality that we've grown up in. And but I'll just respond to the first part of that is, so the Northern Territory, 89% of children in care are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids. On any given day, 100% of kids in custody in the Northern Territory are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids. 43% of people live in regional and remote areas, and so many of these areas are in the lowest socio-economic range in terms of status. So there's a lot of disadvantage and poverty across the Northern Territory, and so many challenges and barriers to access and opportunity. So whether or not it's the remoteness, language and I guess cultural barriers, but I think opportunity is the biggest thing. And I go out to remote community and it's really hard to get out there. We've got a limited budget, and I won't get into budget and funding of oversight bodies, but these are some of the challenges that we grapple with. So I do have a statutory function to promote awareness of and understanding of the rights, interests and wellbeing of vulnerable children, and that largely includes children caught up in youth justice and child protection systems. So that is a function. That's why we do media, that's why we release reports. We do a lot of consultation with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and young people, hearing from them about what matters to them. So initiatives like postcards to the commissioners, a lot of us do that. Going out to places like the detention centres, youth groups, meeting with Clontarf Stars and others where there is that support around young people, because I don't want to just say, come and meet with me, talk to a commissioner, tell us what matters to you. I want to create a safe and supportive environment where young people are empowered to share what they want to share with me. So not to milk them for information, but what do you need me to do? And that's part of our initiatives with postcards to the commissioners. So yeah, it is about promoting awareness and understanding, not just with decision makers, but the broader community. So because we can't do this alone, and that's why I'm going to talk about the strengths of my sisters and brothers here, but we're stronger together because we're all singing from the same songbook. We know we've got an incredible responsibility, but we all bring unique insights and elevate the voices of young people. Like Shona gets out to detention centres just like I do, and actually reflecting back to decision makers what young people are saying. Like that's more powerful than hearing from some of us old people. But yeah, I'll hand it over.
You're the young person, Shona.
I think one of the things that you're right, the elevation of children's voices is integral in this process. And I think one of the things I worry about the most is the public narrative around our children nationally and within our own state, and how children are being positioned as, problems in our community, and how, the only way to fix it is to legislate our way out of a perceived issue. One of, I think, jobs that I'm really proud of and the work that we all do, and one of the strategies I've engaged with is how do we change that narrative? How do we challenge that narrative around youth offending, around the stigma of being in care, about school attendance, about healthiness, even around how children hang out together and engage in kids mucking around. So I produce a series of books called From Those Who Know. Literally, it's 40 pages of quotes, 150 quotes from children directly, and I deliver it into the desks of every minister that I can think of, and I print hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and give them out, just so the universe in South Australia, because South Australia is the centre of the universe, can challenge some of that narrative around what people and grown-ups are saying about our kids, because it's just simply not true, and our children deserve a better narrative than the one we're giving them in this country.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to give you the opportunity for a one sentence. But I know I'm on. What can we do better for young people? So I'm going to start with, you took a deep breath there, so what can we do better for young people? You heard the panel yesterday, you heard the young people talking about young people's voice. Do you think there's a role?
Look, I think we do good, but we can do better, and we need to do everything. Like, these are our future. We just can't sit there and say we do enough, because look at the statistics. We all don't. We all need to keep. It's everything. We can't just rest and
So
say.
you haven't established a youth voice yet?
No. Well, I don't. I've only been in the job 5 weeks.
She's been in the job 5 minutes.
5 weeks.
All right. Let's hand to Jacqueline. What can we do better for young people in our system?
We can believe in them.
We can move beyond sort of this passive notion of participation and actually make space for young people to lead.
Yeah, let them know they're loved, and I guess create, I want to say, authentic assessments that relate to Aboriginal children and young people with fulfilled domains that relate to our people, that guide them through the process, because what I know is the lack of completed culturally appropriate assessment programs really harm our kids.
Yeah, Dale, can I ask you a question? And this is a very complex question. Our sector's predominantly women, female, very. Can we do better for young boys and men and get more men into our sector? Is there something that, we need to, how do we promote this sector? Because you look out there, once upon a time, it would be just about all women. Now we've got so many men, older men. Look at this young fella sitting here frowning at me. But, we saw the panel the other day, there was only one girl up there, so we are, and, being the commissioner up here with all these very strong women, you feel under pressure at all?
Yeah, I should.
Shona's nodding her head saying you should.
I pick my words and my movements quietly, because I feel sometimes I'm caught in between some battlegrounds. Look, but I think we've got to play a role in this space too, in terms of the leadership of men to support our women, our men, our children. There's a role for us to speak up and say to other men, don't muck up. Yep. There's also a role for us to sit silent and say, hey, women got to lead sometimes, and they are the experts in this space.
I think you can hold your own very well by the sounds of things. Shona, one sentence.
I think, what was the question?
What could you do for young people? What can we do for kids? Well, you've got 7 young people.
We don't need to connect my parenting. No. One sentence around what we can do for our kids is we can be... am I allowed to swear? No. We need to be the detectors of when the untruths are being told and call it out, because we have enough experience to see it. We need to call it, and then we need to make sure that our children are front and centre of all those decisions. So you can make it up around that.
Well said.
I agree with all that. I just want to back on what Natalie was saying in terms of young people need to be in these spaces, and they need to be leading conversations, and they need to be at the table making those decisions. And for me, every time I engage with groups of young people, I say, use me as a resource, as a tool. How can I help you get your voices elevated? So creating space for young people.
Great, excellent, thank you very much. So if anyone cares, my 2 bobs worth is I don't want kids leaving care poor without an education. So I reckon young people should have a bank balance, and I also think they should. Our responsibility is making sure they get to university, go through university and get a job. So they're my 2 bobs worth. Now we have questions. We're opening up. Oh, we've got one straight down the front here.
Hello. I might sound louder now because I can talk very well. One of the things that really bother me about child protection is the hoops and tricks we have to play in order to get our kids back once they're in the system. I want people to start, your commissioners, to start working on getting our children back.
That's an absolute statement, and all of the commissioners are nodding their head to say that, yes, we have to work to get our children back home. Yep. Any other? Glenda, click it.
Yes, thank you. And, you know, this is something we've been working on for quite a long time, Aunty Muriel, to have commissioners. And it's really great to see you all up here. And we've been involved in this for about 20 years. So, but I just wanted to make one comment. I didn't hear any discussion or any acknowledging trauma and trauma in our children and in our communities, and that intergenerational trauma, you know, and that is a real issue we're dealing with in how do we support our children and our young people, how do we get them reunified back home, and how do we work then, you know, in a cultural and trauma-informed way in our communities.
Thanks for that question, Aunt. I think being in the roles of commissioners, that we take that into account. I know discussions I've had with every single person, and it's, I guess we take it for granted that it's in our work, and don't want to speak on your behalf, but I think it's a given down in the ground that we have to have that consideration. And I think one of the things when working at VACCA was you can't just return a child back to a family without working with the whole family, because it's a whole system of trauma that we need to, can possibly go back generations, as you know. Don't want to speak to the converted, but I think it's a whole response. Not just the child, not just the family, but sometimes it's the whole community, depending on if you're in quite a remote, small community. And maybe we just take that for granted when we talk, but I would say there's not one person in the room that wouldn't address that. So I hope it answered your question, Aunt.
Yeah. It's probably not an accountability, but us as the service system need to see children's trauma and be able to understand the impact of trauma, and so as a service system.
Thanks, Glenda, for the question. I thought it was Barb going to ask the hard ones. You and I both know we talk all the time about the fact that if we don't deal with trauma, if we don't fund really quality support systems for our children and young people, whether it's that they've been living with family and domestic violence, whether it's that they've been in poverty, and it's usually all of these, and all the social determinants, and give them specifically age and developmentally appropriate counselling and support services direct to children as well as their families, then we're just fluffing at the edges, yeah? So we are all really focused on trauma-informed ways of knowing, being and doing that are grounded in culture.
So we have a question over here. Thank you.
Thanks,
Jack.
There's a few up there, back there too, Aunt. Hi, everyone. I actually have a few questions. First question is, why do we not celebrate young girls, our mob, from the ages of 8 to 15 years old, why don't we teach them? Why don't we as aunties go into the school and stop the shame? Stop them, letting them know that it's okay to menstruate. It's okay to do what you need to do. It's okay to be you, no one else. Because a lot of the young girls that I speak to and my god girls are all scared in schools to speak up, to be them. They're the token Aboriginal or the token of black fella. It's wrong. It has to stop. Why can't we go into schools and educate our young girls that they don't have shamed anymore?
Yep. And Shona, I might give that to you to sort of respond to, because, I mean, that's the beauty of SNAICC's conferences out there. I mean, I saw yesterday education, a lot of education people in the room. We know that the biggest notifier of children is education. So, Shona, I might give that to you to respond.
Yeah, no, I think there is so much opportunity that we're missing out on around celebrating our children across multiple areas, and you know, the opportunity to grow and develop and become the strongest person who they can be. And in developing these programs, it's really important that we engage the kids to think about, you know, to ask us around what they would like.
In Victoria, we have a program called the Big Girls Day Out. Yeah. I know, because I helped set it up. Why don't we have that here? Why is Queensland so 50 years behind and let us girls have nothing? Shame on us as adults. It has to stop. Us young girls, they need to be celebrated too.
Yep, absolutely. Very great. Thank you so much for that. You're right.
Hello?
Any other?
Yes.
Just a question up the back here, Aunt.
I've got one.
Right up the back, and I'm testing your eyesight, my bad. First of
Hello?
all, I just want to... Just up the back, Aunt.
I'm over here.
Can you
I'm
just
waving
give
my
your,
arm. I'm on
yeah,
the
I can
floor.
see you.
Yep.
Can you just say your name so we know who you are and where you're from?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Tamara Creamer. I'm a Kalkadoon Wanya woman, and I live on Darumble country up in Yeppoon, and I work under Natalie Lewis at the Office of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Child Commissioner. My question, first and foremost, I just want to acknowledge the black excellence and leadership that exists on the stage, and I just want to... And I just want to acknowledge the fact that it's a pretty difficult gig for an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commissioner in the systems that you have to battle and navigate, and the fact that you try to create as much space as possible for young people to have their voices heard and how you advocate for them across multiple systems. My question is the fact that I believe in the fact that we have to build an army of blackfellas to advocate for our communities and everything that we do, and we have leadership that exists within us that should be challenging systems. So for yourselves as commissioners, and you talk about the structural and systemic barriers that exist within your roles and what you see, for us mob who walk in our communities every day and our frontline practitioners across education, youth justice, child protection, every system possible, what is your piece of advice to us on how we can start to empower ourselves to challenge the system from that real frontline and community-based context that can support you in your roles moving forward?
I might give that to you, Nat.
Thanks, Tamara. Look, I think one of the most important things that we can do, both for children and for advocates on the ground, is to raise awareness about what our rights are, and to support people to be equipped with a human rights framework to be able to make those arguments against systems. I think that the greatest change happens on the ground, and I think that it's important for us to not become so, self-important that we think that that's the only space where advocacy matters, because the reality is those experiences, those interactions with our children and young people every single day, they demand advocacy because they're things that you can't see and walk past, right? And so I think that when we empower our young people and our advocates, with the knowledge about rights, and then we are responsible for moving the barriers out of the way to make a legitimate pathway for redress and for people to have their rights upheld. I think that's how those two pieces interact with one another. Because people can't enjoy or activate rights that they don't know they have.
The commissioners don't operate in isolation either. They work very closely with all the jurisdictional peaks, and so it's really, really important to understand the context in which the commissioners work. And so Safe and Supported is going to be giving a session, and they'll be talking about the policy partnerships, but the commissioners really do contribute to the leadership and the voice of SNAICC, and so we just need to acknowledge that you're not alone, you know, you're part of us, and that we will work with you because, you know, we know that there are many out there that represent the peaks that work very closely with you. So we got a question?
Yes, I've been waiting here, and I'm so glad to see all of you up here. My name's Eunice Wanganeen Bartlett. I'm from Adelaide, South Australia, and I'm glad to see you all up here because when working with our ground people on the ground, that's the key for me because you people have to make the change, right? But like I've heard you say, there's still our children being taken away. There is reason for some of it, but how and what and why you fellas do it. But you're up top here. We're the people out here on the ground that have to do the hard yards and work with the social workers that don't consult with our Aboriginal people that are in the office, on the ground. Who do they talk to? They don't know, some of them don't know the community. That's one of the things that I always growl about, and I have been for years. And our children are still being taken away. So you fellas up there, I've got to hold you fellas accountable because they're still being removed. And you fellas are there saying, okay, these policies, procedures and all that, but it's the DCP workers, the social workers also, that need to be told and speak to our community and the elders. And I love seeing all the grey hair people out here because I still think we're all still saying the same thing, you know. I'm caring for my two little grandchildren now, 3 years old and 5 years old. And I tell that social worker what I want and how I want it and do this and do that for me, and they have. But it's still a struggle for me as an elder. You know, I'm raising children again. I'm still going through the system. My little nanas are wards of the state, and I hate that sound. I hate saying that. They're my nanas, and I'm going to do and say what I want for them. But you fellas have to make it happen.
Thanks very much. You got your own fan club, Dale.
Can I just say something,
Hello.
I'd just like to say, we might have fancy titles, but, you know, we're still embedded in our communities. We're still black people.
Yeah.
And we're still doing our jobs, and we've all worked in the front line, and we're still in our grassroots communities. Fancy title or not.
Hello, I've got a question.
Got one.
Hello.
Yeah. All right, this is the last question. Come.
Yeah, listen, I've got a question. My name's Benedicta. I'm from the Kimberleys.
Oh, yep.
I'm
going to sit down.
I'm from a remote community of 400 plus people. I've just got just a couple of questions. Myself, I'm also proud of you guys up there who represent us, and we need more of our Indigenous people up in government. But just my first question is, do you guys actually sit down with other commissioners, ministers, and that either in housing or, you know, with the police department and things like that? Only because we're speaking about our children, and I think for us to move forward and give them better lives, it actually has to start from the home. And a lot of us, we don't have homes. We're sharing homes with 3 or 4 families, you know, so I'm saying like, you know, with housing and that, for us to actually close this gap within our children, each family has to actually try and have their own home, you know. And a lot of us in the remotes, we're sharing a house, 3-bedroom house with 3 or 4 other families. So how do we get out of all of that? Even, you know, this is where the trauma starts, this is where this starts, that starts. Kids don't go to school because they haven't had a good night's sleep, or they haven't had food on the table because they're sharing with 3 or 4 different other families, you know. Like, do you actually get the opportunity to sit with other different service providers to say, this is how we close the gap in our communities, you know? That's one question. The second one is, a lot of our youth are getting into crimes, and we have that at home. And our biggest problem, because I actually run my community, is we don't have youth facilities. And for us to actually try and get these facilities is we have to, sort of my words is, beg and plead the government to put in infrastructure here, there. Instead of, it should be there automatically, you know. We should have a youth center, we should have a footy oval, we should have you know, all these things like a basketball courts and that. But here we have to actually try and fill in funds, you know, to try and think. And we've got non-government people actually helping us instead of our own government, you know, with all these facilities and stuff, you know, with our early childhood. So just those 2 questions, please.
Hello. Thank you, Dja. Yes, we do, and specifically for me in WA, we work with all ministers. You know, I left government because I thought I didn't want to see a minister anymore. Now I have to see multiple ministers. We work across everything because the future and wellbeing of our children is not just about child protection and the legal system. It is about safe housing, it is about the social determinants, it is about health and wellbeing. And we work across multiple ministers, multiple government departments, but more importantly, in terms of my role, I work with all of our communities, especially those in the remote locations in the Kimberley and across the Western Desert. So thank you, Dja, for asking the questions, but I speak for all of us. We all work across the whole system.
We have time for one more question. Yep, up the back.
Hello? Oh, sorry. Hi, my name is Josephine Sampson. I'm a Meanjin from WA in the Pilbara, where all the mining goes and all the excitement things that are happening in the Pilbara. My question is that I really admire you guys that are sitting up on the panel there. But it's just that back at home, we fight and we tell the government what we want. You know, I don't talk to middle people, I go to the top. I climb the tree and I shout it out and tell them, listen to what we got to say. And we're also protecting our children. And, you know, education starts at home. We do the same thing like Sister talking from Kimberley. Housing is a problem. But education also starts at home with our children. And many of the children, some of them are broken, you know, from their parents. So the aunties and the other grandmothers and grandfathers take them on. But to be able to take care of our next generation is land and our heritage. It's to do with a lot of our land because that's what we have, is heritage of our land. Because our children need to go back and start to be educated back on the land as well, on the mainstream level. Because we fight also for our land. We try to stop the government. We cannot keep on going and demolishing, we talk about a hill. Oh, that was one time a hill there, but how do we explain that to our children and to tell them? And our beautiful scenery was there, and it's no more longer there. So we're fighting with the government. And, like we said, I heard it from you guys at the panel, is a different language. Now, my auntie, she died now, but fighting for the country. And, there were just bullies just coming in there, didn't give us hoofs about our concerns and our rights to protect for the next generation. Because our education and as well as our heritage is always passed down by listening, hearing, and practice on. That's numeracy and literacy for our people. But it's about listening, learning, and hands-on practice. So these guys come in, and see, this is where the misinterpretation of understanding in two language and in two worlds. So when this lady came in and approached, she said, I am this and I'm that. It's from a company that's multi-million-dollar company to going into our land and disturbing, could be our burial sites there. But it's a courtesy to pick up a phone and say, all right, we want to do, there's a railway line that has been demolished after flood season. Anyways, she got up and she's presented herself this and that. And anyways, my auntie got the same paper and she said, so what she was saying is to tell the elders, did you guys understand what this lady was talking about in terms for our land? And she said, no, I didn't. Well, then maybe you need to get off your high horse and start negotiating, and so that we can have a better understanding and how that we can take this forward. So this is where I'm saying, in the education department, I've worked in the education department as well, and we make our children very special. Each time we have birthdays for them, we tell them, I take them out of country, I tell them about history. Our histories are not told in education to lift our children up and to say, okay, this is what your grandmother and your grandfather did on stations. Because my father was a head stockman, and he used to come on with rations. And I still remember that still today as at that time when he came. So this is where education really, our heritage is our land. So this is where it's really important to take our children back and to tell them about plants, animals, how to be a tracker. Even a health worker, Aboriginal health worker, he will go and he knows that in the community, this person has a really major issue, medication that he needs. So that black tracker, he'll follow and he'll go to the aunties, he'll go to the uncles until he finds the person to let him know it's an appointment to be done, you have to go. But when we have non-Indigenous people, health workers working for the Aboriginal people, they just stuck a card in there and off they go. So, this is where that we need support as we're networking here today to talk about issues relating to traumas with our children and all the past histories. Many of us have been through traumas as well, as adults, but we're trying to address that, and so that our children will make, to show them a better future as well. Not being racist or prejudiced, whatever, teach them the principles of a human being and as involving every race.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Can we thank all of our panel? Let me be very, very, very clear. The commissioners have a role, but we also have a role. Yeah. We, as the Aboriginal Service System, we as organisations that work as peaks, that work as statewide, we have a role. They are not the be-all and end-all. They have a role, and we will support them. What we have here is a group of people that will go in and fight, but we have to produce the evidence and do the work on the ground. And I think know your peaks in your own state, take the advocacy to them, and they're the ones that are in your jurisdictions that are your reps. And so between the commissioners and the peak agencies and those that work, please, let's work together to make everything better for our Aboriginal children. So thank you very much to Shahleena, Shona, Dale, Natalie, Jack, and Sue-Ann. Thank you very much.
What an essential conversation about system accountability and the path forward for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children's wellbeing and rights. a powerful reminder of the important role these advocates play in holding systems accountable and driving further change for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. If this discussion resonated with you, help amplify these voices by sharing this podcast. And don't forget, more SNAICC 25 podcasts are coming soon. For resources and continued learning, visit snaic.org.au. Thank you for listening to Kids, Culture, Community, SNAICC Yarns.